This morning, Trump said he would be placing the D.C. Police Department under federal control and deploying at least 800 National Guard troops to the district, citing what he says is out-of-control crime, with an emphasis on juvenile crime. Take a listen to how Trump falsely described the nation's capital, where more than 700,000 everyday Americans live and work.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse. This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back.
So before we even get to what he is doing and why he is doing it, let's focus on the facts, because his claims about crime in D.C. are lies. Violent crime in Washington, D.C. is at a 30-year low that is according to Trump's own Department of Justice. Trump's acting U.S. attorney for the district, Ed Martin, credited him with a 25% drop in crime less than 4 months ago. But Donald Trump has consistently shown us that he does not care about facts, doesn't care about them. He cares about power and expanding that power no matter the cost, no matter how egregiously false the pretext. We know this because he has tried this before. Today, in a courtroom more than 2,500 miles away, the case of Newsom v. Trump officially began in San Francisco, California, arguing that Donald Trump's deployment of the National Guard to L.A. violated a federal law barring federal troops from participating in civilian law enforcement. Joining us now, Lisa Rubin, an MSNBC legal correspondent, and Corey Brettschneider, a professor of political science at Brown University, co-host of the podcast The Oath and the Office, and author of the book The Presidents and the People: 5 Leaders Who Threatened Democracy and the Citizens Who Fought to Defend It.
Well, I think this is a good night to have both of you here. Let's start with the announcement from the White House today. I personally think that the president is using the issue of juvenile crime in D.C., which frankly is not unlike juvenile crime in any major or not so major city in America, as a pretext for his authoritarian overreach. And I think that there is a rhetoric versus a reality. The rhetoric is saying that D.C. is overrun by criminals and it's dangerous. As a D.C. resident, I can tell you that I care about public safety. I think my neighbors do. I think my local government does. And I don't feel unsafe in the city. I left my house this morning and it didn't seem as though we were under siege and needed to be liberated. But the rhetoric, the president is trying to take it a step further. And I just want to play what the mayor had to say today about their organizational makeup and how, from her perspective, it hasn't changed, and we'll dig into it.
Nothing about our organizational chart has changed, and nothing in the executive order would indicate otherwise. So the chief of police reports through the deputy mayor to the mayor of the District of Columbia, and the 2 people I think that were identified in the presser report to Attorney General Bondi. The executive order makes clear that all requests for MPD services, the president delegates to Attorney General Bondi.
The rhetoric that Donald Trump employed today at the press conference from the White House does not mirror what is in the law, the D.C. Home Rule Act, and it does not mirror what's in his own executive order. He is trying to take the rhetoric further. He's trying to bully the District of Columbia and their police department into submitting to him. Because if he can do it on this, just like on immigration, right? If he can do it on this, he can replicate this in many other cities. What do you think, Lisa Rubin?
I think this is a particularly pernicious situation in a couple of ways. Let's start with the fact that, as you noted, this is a president who's governing almost by anecdote rather than by empirical data, right? We know that he's not just using juvenile crime as a pretext. He's using a particular incident of juvenile crime involving a former DOJ staffer who was involved in a carjacking in a particularly violent way. But that seems to be what has led the president into this moment, a single incident of juvenile crime, rather than a pattern of it, because as we know, as Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, a 34-year veteran of Congress, said today, crime is at an all-time low in D.C., or at least a 30-year low. That can't be refuted by this White House. Instead, what they want to say is D.C. has one of the highest crime rates in the country. Well, that is perhaps true. There are 50 states plus the District of Columbia. Somebody's going to be at the top of the list.
But DC
somebody's going to be at the bottom.
DC's not even in the top 10.
Right.
He is just lying. DC is, it's animating because he'll just say these things.
Right.
And if you say it enough times, it becomes truth to some people. And what he is doing is not going to fix the issue of juvenile crime.
No,
The issue will be fixed by policy.
No, it's not going to fix juvenile crime. And he's sort of having this bifurcated strategy here that is legally novel in two ways, right? One is to ignore D.C. home rule and to federalize the MPD, the Metropolitan Police Department. The second is using the National Guard and then farming them out to D.C. where they are not wanted or needed right now, sort of on a rotating basis, 100 to 200 at a time. But in both cases, he's relying on statutory contexts that haven't been used in other situations in the same way that he has sort of relied on arcane statutes and other places that we can think of, the Alien Enemies Act, or, for example, in Los Angeles, where he used National Guard subject to a different statutory authority. It's like somebody made a book for him of all these little used statutes and said, Mr. President, these are the elastic laws. Stretch them as you will and as you see fit, because there isn't case law in many of these circumstances to constrain you. So let's see how far we can stretch this republic before it breaks.
Imagine a bedside table that had on it that book that you just referenced, imagined though it may be, Project 2025 and the Orban playbook, because you put them all together and you have a perfect map for what we're watching right now.
Absolutely. And I would say I've been talking on this show often about the idea of a self-coup, that he's trying to usurp the power of Congress, that he's trying to usurp the judiciary. But now we're seeing the trappings of a more traditional coup because the military is coming out. And that is something that we associate not with what sometimes political scientists call soft coups, but hard coups. And he's facing pushback in California. There, the governor rightly and heroically is saying the federal government is limited in its power. There's no statutory authority, as you just heard, to bring out the military to shut down free speech or to even act as a police force, that the tradition of our country has a 10th Amendment, which has local control over the police. And there's a long tradition that Newsom is acting in of citizens fighting back using the states. So when John Adams shut down free speech using the Sedition Act, Jefferson and Madison used the power of Virginia and Kentucky and the resolutions to say, no, we're not going to cooperate with the federal government. Here's the problem, that Washington, D.C., he knows he has more control, and he's facing less pushback from the mayor there. There isn't a state. And it starts to raise the question, don't we need statehood for Washington, D.C.? Of course we do. We need to have that democratic representation, because what we have to do is make sure that this pattern of this, not just soft coup, but now increasingly hard coup, that it's stopped, and the states are our best option.
Well, look, I talked to a bunch of local leaders in D.C. today, and they would say the same thing. They would also say that Democrats had the opportunity when they were in control of the government. There was a bill. Eleanor Holmes Norton, Senator Van Hollen, they had a bill put forward to give D.C., let's just say not even statehood, to give them control over the National Guard. And they couldn't even pass that. D.C. statehood has been put before Congress time and time again. And for whatever reason, the filibuster, wanting to be fair, wanting to be whatever people want to say, it hasn't gotten done. And here we are today. Yeah. I am concerned that we are slow walking, or maybe fastly running into an autocracy, if you will, but like people can still get their lattes and their matchas, so it doesn't seem as bad, right? Because what the point that you make, what the president did and said today mirrors language he has used before, and it is all on the pretext of playing on real fears that people have. You know, like, no one wants to feel as though that they are in an unsafe situation. People don't want to believe that there's something nefarious going on. And if they feel that maybe there could be, there are reasons that they will allow a government to potentially do something that they would not usually allow a government to do. There are people that in Washington, D.C., if you ask them right now, like my Uber driver this morning, who said, hey, you know, I mean, maybe Donald Trump has a point. Just like the same people that said maybe he has a point on immigration. He's using, there's just enough there fear, just enough there to let it go too far.
But it's more than fear. It's also fear based on an anecdote that people can see. So in this instance, that Doge staffer becomes the evidentiary pretext here. It's not that he's imaginary. He's very real. What happened to him is very real. It's just not representative of the reality, right? And in that respect, D.C. is the perfect laboratory, Simone, for his crawl or run toward autocracy because they don't have home rule. But I want to go back to a point that Corey made about sort of soft coup, because the other participant in this soft coup is Congress itself, right? Because under the D.C. Home Rule Act, this rule, this takeover of the MPD, can't stay in place for more than 30 days unless Congress extends it. Well, then what does Mike Johnson do? What does John Thune do? Are they really going to say that there's an emergency in D.C. given the statistics collected by this federal government, this administration?
Where's the emergency? Lisa Rubin asked a good question. Where is the emergency?
There is no emergency here. But the problem with the statute is, you know, if I'm a court looking at this, the president determines in his sole authority under the terms of the statute what the emergency is, and then he can federalize the use of the Metropolitan Police Department. I think the better pushback here, or at least from a statutory interpretation, perspective, is that there is a 30 days, it expires, and after that, there is no federal control unless Congress specifically authorizes as much. They don't have to refuse him that authority. They have to authorize it. So what's going to happen 30 days from now?
Speak to the role of Congress, but then I want to ask you about another piece of this.
I would say that, the way that a coup works and that this coup is unfolding isn't with resistance. Sometimes people walk head on into it, and part of it is happening in that there are American citizens who think to themselves, well, maybe they're buying it. Maybe there is a danger out there. But let's not be confused. I think the point that we're making, that the American people really need to hear, is that what this president is trying to do is to replace the rule of law with fear of lawlessness. And he's using this threat, misguided and not based on empirical data, in order to really replace our system of government. And when you have a Congress that is refusing to stand up, as they can in so many instances, they could, for instance, amend the Insurrection Act to make it very clear that he can't use it to shut down protest, a thing that he hasn't done yet, but that he certainly might. Because let's not be confused. The danger here isn't just the nation's capital. He's talking about the nation's capital right now. It's extending that military use of force to shut down our most basic rights, including, of course, our right to protest. And what he's doing is using it as a lab experiment to expand out to other states.